Hi there and welcome to the show. I hope everybody isn't suffering too badly through this manufactured COVID-19 crisis. Be sure to check out the information on this channel regarding checkpoints, lockdowns and more. But today I'll be covering a tragic case, speaking with David Thibodeau, survivor of the WACO tragedy. David, you're the exact definition of a true survivor. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Hey, look, I just got my new WACOsurvivors.com hat in the mail. Very happy.
Very good. Now,
I'm not going to wear it for the interview, but anyway, it's neat.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
We've been working on trying to do some stuff for the property. I'm hoping at the end of this we can talk about that, the property a little bit, and the website I just created.
Of course. What was life like living in the Mount Carmel compound?
It was just, we called it a house. A lot of people, they like to say compound over and over again. It's one of those words they use to demonize everyone, like cults, or there's all kinds of words that they've used over the past. To me, to me, it was just a house. You know, it was made of cardboard and what do they call that? Sheetrock. You know, it wasn't made of any fine material. It wasn't a compound-like material, but it was a big building, so I see why, people would say that. But it's just one of those things, I was there. I was only there a couple of years, frankly. I was only there 1 year in Waco, pretty much solidly.
Right, yes, there's been many depictions through the mainstream media and other documentaries, an ongoing campaign to hide certain information. Well, one good picture was Waco, the big lie. It shows the corruption was massive there. And they recently done one on Netflix. How do you feel the story was portrayed on that platform?
Okay, first of all, I want to address Waco, the big lie. Because if you're talking about the Linda Thompson production, she's a complete agent provocateur. She had some interesting information on there, but the big stuff that she had, the tank with flames on it, if you know what I'm referring to, there was no tank with flames on it. What she did is she cut the video so the tank goes in and out twice, and it looks like there's flame. It looks like the tank is setting the place on fire. In reality, if you watch the uncut, unedited version, when it backs out, you can see there's something over the turret, and it's like that pink insulation, the fiber stuff is on one of the turrets, and as you watch the tank back away, you see it reflecting off of the pink stuff. So I don't like Linda Thompson has done a great disservice to everyone. So whenever someone mentions her name, she made calls in. When I had my first talks, when I was trying to get my first talks going in Florida, she made calls to say that I was a government agent, and that's why I wasn't charged and no one should listen to what I had to say. So because of her, I lost my very first speaking gigs and almost gave up on the whole thing right there. She's just a piece of crap, the truth of this thing is so outrageous. There's no need to make anything up. Honest to God, you do not need to make anything up to have a story like Waco. And the fact that she could do that, I don't know, it really bothers me when people do stuff like that. There's no need for it. Now, the 6-part series that came out recently, that's based on my book, and it's based on another book, Stalling for Time, one of the FBI negotiators, who was, there was 23 negotiators the FBI went through during the course of the 51-day siege. A couple of them, David and Steve liked. It's my belief that it was, that guy was one. Gary Nesner. Gary Nesner was the other individual. Now, I liked the series a lot. It's, great drama. It's technically a fictional tale that's based on historical fact. What they did is they changed some chronologies. They changed a lot of the names. They did character condensation is what I say. They had to take many characters, 130 people in that building.
Yes.
And so they had to take all those stories and put them into just like 6 or 7 different characters. So they attributed my character to doing many things that I didn't do, but other people did, like burying the body in the front of the building. That actually happened, but Greg Summers did that. He was burying Peter Gent's body. And right where he buried his body, he put a cross up, and then he lined the dogs up. Because on the first day, the ATF came in and they slaughtered our dogs. We had 5 Alaskan Malamutes, beautiful dogs. They just killed them in cold blood. First thing they did, some of the first shots that was indicated in the trials in San Antonio were them killing and shooting and killing the dogs. So Greg Summers, who buried Peter Jen in the front, also took care of the dogs. He lined them up. He wanted the world to see what they had done here. And then, over the course of the next 3 weeks or so, the tanks, as they were becoming more frustrated, the tank drivers started running over Peter's grave. And we requested they not do that on several occasions, but they just didn't care. They kept running it over with malice. They were just boys with their toys. They didn't care who they hurt or what they did. That's why, like during the siege, they would get on the tanks. They would give us the finger. They would moon the women looking out of the windows. They were just crazy.
It was an atrocious crime perpetrated by ATF, FBI agents. What they done is unspeakable atrocity, and it will never be forgotten. Now, David Koresh seemed like a prophet. He was really switched on. He knew the direction we're all heading in and the danger that people are in. What was your opinion of him?
One of the deepest individuals I'd ever known. A lot of people just, it's easy to believe that Koresh was a religious fanatic who was leading a bunch of sheeple, religious fanatics, who needed to believe in something greater, and that he was so charismatic that he could manipulate all these people. That's the scenario they wanted everyone to believe, because that is the true scenario with many other leaders. The difference between David to me is the fact that he actually could reveal the seals. He did know. He knew the book from Genesis to Revelation. And it wasn't like he was faking it. It's like he knew what it said, what it meant, where we're going. He believed he was the seventh angel's message, which according to Seventh-day Adventist lore, once you get to the seventh angel, that's the kingdom of God is to be set up. And a whole bunch of events have to take place after the seventh angel sounds. God gives you a lot of time after the seventh angel is gone to prepare for the time of trouble, such as never was since the beginning of time. And, I am not a prophet of disaster. I study with David and I get all of that and I understand the scripture. My problem is I'm a historian. Not that it's a problem. But, when I think of God setting up his kingdom, if ever in the history of the world that should happen, that was in 70 AD, when the Romans came in and sacked Jerusalem and destroyed it. And that's when all the great rabbis and the holy men of Israel believed that was going to happen. That God at that point was going to kick the butt of the Romans and set the Jews up, and they would rule the world with God. That didn't happen. Maybe if I lived in World War II, I would have thought World War II was the time of trouble since it never was since the beginning of time. Because the whole world was involved in a war. Millions and millions of people slaughtered, wiped out. Some just for being Jewish, some for being gay, some for being gypsies, some for being Japanese, some for being American, some for being what other country and whatever, side of the battle you're on. So, that could have been a time of trouble. Even World War II, if you think about that in your head, according to Scripture, what is to come is not even to be compared with it. So a time of trouble worse than World War II, oh my God, what's that going to be? We got COVID now. Well, who knows what's going to happen? What we know for sure is the world has changed within a year. In 2020, the world has changed in ways that we can't even comprehend or understand. And really, there's no going back. How are we going to go back to the system?
Yes, it'll be very, very difficult to recover. And a lot of people say we're living in an end times prophecy now. We need more people like David to educate others, read their spiritual handbook, speak about the good word of the Lord, and try and instill wholesome values. But the media, they like to demonize people that go against the grain, try and live outside of the system. So it's very deceitful, and it's a crime that's being committed here, trying to run a smear campaign over the top. That's horrible. And footage of the ATF agents raiding the place, it looks like they were very incompetent as well. A film that was released, it even looks like at one point they were shooting each other. So it was very mishandled, wasn't it?
Yeah, if you were at the trials in San Antonio when they were trying some of the guys They were standing trial for conspiracy to commit murder against federal agents. They were all acquitted of that. Some of them were found guilty of a lesser charge of aiding and abetting voluntary manslaughter during the commission of a crime with a firearm. The jury, had they known what the judge was going to do, would have thrown everything out. That's what the head jury forewoman told us. But they didn't know that once the jury went home, the judge was going to add in his own sentence and basically give people 40 years on a weapons violation that at one point the jury thought was thrown out. So it's really complicated what they did. But at the trial, I brought it up because the trials in San Antonio, we learned a couple of things. And one was there was an agent that testified that he reached for his sidearm and it accidentally went off. And when the sidearm went off, he believed that that was the first shot being fired. We had another group of agents that went over to shoot the dogs. And the indications were they were the first people to shoot, was shooting at the dogs. And that's what started the whole thing off. So, it seems that no one's really 100% sure exactly. But it does, it seems like they've started it from their own testimony.
Absolutely. And the media was kept at a distance from the scene to maintain a level of secrecy over the whole operation. So no information was released. They all kept it under tight wraps, didn't they?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it's very deceitful, the way it was all organised like that. And there was information reported that one of the Branch Davidians rang the Cult Awareness Network and filed a complaint. That was very unfortunate, wasn't it?
Which one that was or who that was. Cult Awareness Network has been known for some pretty skivvy things. We know case law, the law has been changed because of them. They were kidnapping people and performing, what they call deprogramming, cult deprogramming. The problem is a lot of people were going back to the groups that they were being kidnapped out of and saying, look, this is the life I've chosen. These are the people I want to be with. Yeah. There's nothing you can do about it. So there was a judge that basically changed the law. They can no longer kidnap people and quote unquote deprogram them. Rick Ross is the leader of one of those the Cult Awareness Network at the time, or he had a hand in it. He had something happen with him and my mother. My mother doesn't like Rick Ross at all. He thinks he's a total scumbag. Right. And I know they still consult with him. Like when they did that video game recently, I think Far Cry 5. They consulted with him because they had a leader, a David Koresh type leader in that game. I haven't seen the game, but I read the article about them paying him like $10,000 to let him know who, the kind of person that they want to create in their game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all a shame, it's like they're taking someone who really understands the scripture and they just want to make him to be this evil, crazy person. And there's so much more story, There are things that David Koresh did as a leader that I said, yeah, you maybe shouldn't have gone that route. Maybe he made mistakes. David Koresh was far from perfect, but he also wasn't the monster they made him out to. And that's what my whole book was about. And it's not just Dave. I'm not sticking up for Dave. I'm sticking up for the community. Some of those were the smartest people I'd ever known. Wayne Martin, Steve Schneider, Greg Summers. Some of these guys were very, very bright. They were, they had been pursuing higher education when they met David.
Yeah, very intelligent community that was there. David had a lot of wisdom, but yeah, information released stating that he was in multiple relationships with women at the place and fathered many children out there. Was there merit to those claims?
Yeah, he definitely had a lot of kids with a lot of the women there. By the time I came in the community, the community had already been established. And I started to look around. I'm seeing all these, what looked to be single moms. What's he taking care of single mothers? Is that his thing? I didn't, as I started to understand the seals and we got to the first seal and through the second seal, I started to see, what he was doing. He was having kids for the end times. It was part of his message. It was part of what he was teaching there. And it had to do with the 24 elders in Revelation. It's also found in other scriptures as well. There was definitely a scriptural reason for everything that he did, whether, people like it or want to accept it or not. Let me ask you, Jeff, what's your background? You seem to have a bit of knowledge when it comes to spiritual things.
Well, see, I've been studying matters of importance, esoteric knowledge, information that's kept from the public's knowledge, everything they try and hide. You know, once I reached my early 20s, that made me look to, you know, why are they putting so many things, secret files, that they don't want to let anybody obtain that information. That sparks curiosity. That makes you want to look into it even further. And yeah, one of the first things, I must have been about 21, 22, I come across a lot of information surrounding Waco. I looked at the horrible crime that the agents were committing, specifically the children as well, and their audio calls of a child begging for emergency personnel to help. And they were just absolutely heartless. And they said nobody is coming to help. And I looked at Waco, I looked at, of course, 9/11, I looked at some of the false flag attacks. And yeah, this was Oklahoma, another one. But yeah, I focused on this one. It really got my attention, and how the whole thing was handled, and with so much ill will, and you know, towards family members, American citizens. And then I noticed the disinformation campaign that ran alongside it. So it definitely had my attention, and it still does many years later. But yeah, just the way they were so heartless, and the corruption, it was just completely rampant. You look into it, the ATF funding as well, you know, that there was multiple agendas at play. Even along the lines, some people even say it was a ritualistic sacrifice, if you look at the time and dates. I studied it at length. It was one of the first things that really woke me up to just how corrupt the police force is.
Are you talking about Baal? April 19th being a high sacrificial day for the ancient god Baal, where they sacrificing children literally to that deity. To me, that I just learned that recently, that it was an actual day in history, and I wasn't aware of that. It kind of blew me away. I mean, I don't know the truth of that kind of. You know, if we go too far back with the ancient wisdom, if you will. I mean, you're sacrificing kids. That's not wisdom as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, some of that's pretty heavy stuff, man, when you really start to look into it more.
Yeah, you look through the layers of this case, and it just keeps going. It really is really, really crazy, this whole story. And, you know, they say they placed undercover agents in a home nearby, and they were disguised as ranchers. Was that correct as well, or was it?
Yeah, it was right across the street. There was a little house there, and all of a sudden these four guys move in. You know, they're in their mid-30s. They look like they're, I don't know what they look like. They had brand new trucks. You know, they moved, instead of moving in any furniture, they were moving in camera equipment that looked like equipment cases. And they were claiming that they were TSTC students. TSTC is the technical college where you go to learn about wood crafting, how to weld, that kind of thing. And one of them claimed, when I asked Robert, I said, what are you studying at TSTC? And he said, philosophy. Oh, you're studying philosophy at a technical trade college. I didn't know that they had philosophy there. And, you know, it's just their story didn't make a lot of sense to me. But, you know, one thing I wanted to bring up, we can get back to them in a second,
Yeah.
but I'll forget if I don't bring it up now. When we were talking about other events that occurred, Randy Weaver, of course, in Idaho, the Ruby Ridge incident.
Yes, I've covered that here on the show. That has been suppressed, a lot of that. I've only been looking into that this year. We didn't hear much about that here in Australia.
Interesting. You know, I've just become friends with Sarah Weaver. Sarah was 16, and she was, you know, one of Randy Weaver's children that was living in the house. And she was telling, you know, I read her book, and then we had a long talk about everything. And, you know, they shot her brother on the first day, little Sammy. And then a couple days later, you know, when they were, Kevin Harris and Randy Weaver were coming from a shed, and Vicky had the door open for him, saying, come on in quick, because somebody started to shoot, one of the snipers. Lon T. Horiuchi was the FBI sniper, and shot her in the face and ripped her bottom of her jaw off. And then, you know, poor Sarah had to stay in that house with her mother, dead in the kitchen in a pool of blood. And to make matters worse, now, in fairness to the government, I don't think I have to be fair because they lie about everything, but I will. In fairness to the government, they said that they did not realize that Vicki Weaver was killed. I personally don't believe that, but that's what they say. And so what they did is over the course of the next couple of days, to mess with the Weavers, they'd be like, what are you making for breakfast, Vicki? You gonna have pancakes today? What are you making? So they claim that they didn't know she was dead. I don't believe them. I think they knew damn well that they'd killed her and that they were being the pricks that they really are to the family. Can you imagine saying that to someone's family, knowing you just killed the mother? That's just that kind of, it's raw evil. It's just, it's the ultimate base human evil instinct. And I just don't understand it, Jeff. I've never understood how people could be that cruel, but yet they are. These are the people that serve the government. These are the people that get paid to murder on behalf of the United States government, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't, there's no recourse, and you can't take them to court. You can't take them to civil court. They can kill you. There's not a damn thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. The corruption, it's putrid, and they always protect their own. If anyone tries to speak forward, they're always threatened inside the agency. Law enforcement, it's got a horrible history, and that's why there's an ongoing campaign to defund the police, because people are sick of the brutality. They're sick of what's taking place. These people that are there to serve and protect are the ones that are committing these atrocious crimes on the public, and people are disgusted. And it's incidents like Waco, Ruby Ridge, you know, people look at that, even recent events, and they've had enough, and you cannot blame them. And it looks like a lot more tragedies are going to be on the rise like this, the way we're heading in the current climate. It really is atrocious, and people should have every right to stockpile weapons if they need to, speak the word of the Lord, and live off the grid by their own circumstances, and not have to worry about criminal elements of the government raiding, hurting families, hurting religious folks. You know, that right there, it's one of the most evil events that has ever happened and been committed on humanity, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's I don't mean to laugh. Is you know, being there and watching a tank come through your front door and having to jump back because the tank, you're in danger of being run over by a tank, is an experience that I wouldn't wish anyone to have to go through that. I remember watching the tank come through the double doors and just being like, what is happening here? That's a tank coming into the building. It's an awesome thing. I laugh because we're a little desensitized. No, I'm not desensitized, but when you talk about this thing so much and you have to talk about dead children over and over and over again, you know, I'll be talking to people that are in my crew or my group, my circle, and we're so used to talking about these things that sometimes we'll be in public and we'll be talking about it. We'll look around and realize, you know, can't stay on the dead babies. Because, you know, I mean, normal people wouldn't have conversations like we do. And I'm sure they're quite horrified by it. But they should be. And maybe it's time for them to start having these questions, these kind of conversations. One of the things that bothered me during the Iraq War is when Bush Sr. basically said that he was going to, the very first war, all the wars, one of the first things they did was not allow pictures of any of the servicemen to be seen in local press or in the papers. Well, of course they don't want pictures, because then you realize the toll of a war. But that's how they sanitize war. They don't show you the pictures of the bodies. Not even bodies in the caskets. They want to keep that from the people. So they don't realize what war is. And unfortunately, enough Americans are ignorant enough, because we have everything we want here. So when you're living in your own kingdom, in your own house, and you just hope that Netflix doesn't go out. You hope that the grocery store doesn't shut down. You're not worried about these things.
Absolutely. People are removed from the bloodshed and the horror. You know, they're separated from that. I would imagine that you would have a extreme post-traumatic stress disorder after this. You must have needed possibly even counseling. It's very traumatic what you suffered through. How are you handling it today? You must have nightmares, I'd imagine.
Actually, not anymore. They're very rare now. The first thing was a helicopter. When I would hear a helicopter, I'd be wide awake, but then all of a sudden I would open my eyes again and I would be under my bed. So I wouldn't know how I got under my bed, but my reaction was I hear a helicopter and I would go under something. I would be hiding from it. That was a weird experience. But, you know, I've talked about it so much. I wrote a book about it, and I've talked about it over the years so much that, you know, it's all on the surface for me. The completion, I think, of I'm angry. It's the lack of justice that the reason I'm angry today. The event happened so long ago. I can get over that. I can even forgive certain people, believe it or not, for what they have done. What I can't let go of is the lack of justice, is the fact that these people who shot American citizens, who shot English citizens, Australian citizens, New Zealand citizens, people all over the world, basically, all kinds of different countries were represented in Mount Carmel. And there's some snipers and there's some people that maybe special forces that were out there by the tanks at the back of the building. If you watch the best documentary is WACO, The Rules of Engagement.
Okay.
The second best documentary is WACO, A New Revelation, which is the sequel to Rules of Engagement. Rules of Engagement was nominated for an Oscar, and that has the infrared video on it at the end. What the infrared is, the FBI had a plane flying above the building, 2 miles above, on the last day. And the infrared is heat technology. If something's really bright, it's like a black and white video. Anything bright shows up as white. Right at the gym, we see the tank go into the gym and actually destroy the gym and level the back building, the back gym, to the ground. Right in there's a dog run area. There's a window at the back. We see 2 huge explosions on the infrared. Right before the fire, there's 2 explosions right in the area where the FBI is in charge of. Very interesting. Then after that, as the place is burning, there's 2 tanks. And next to one of the tanks, you see fully automatic weapons fire. These flashes going on. Those flashes, many experts have said is fully automatic weapons fire. The government found an expert that would say it was sunlight reflection. Mm-hmm. I don't understand how you can't have sunlight reflection on an infrared video because it's heat seeking. It shows heat signatures. So it can't possibly be a sunlight reflection, but that's what they say. And enough sheeple in this country want to believe that because a lot of people don't want to believe their government is capable of doing what they did in Mount Carmel. And so I'm still working with that. I'm still trying to fight that. It hasn't been publicly acknowledged. Enough people have seen the documentary. It was nominated for an Oscar. Enough people know what really happened there. But until it's acknowledged and there's apologies and all that, it's meaningless. And the fact that all these ATF agents that screwed up so bad, the ATF, more importantly than the agents, it's the higher ups, it's the commanders of the ATF and the FBI. I think 2 of them had to retire early. That's the most punishment they got. They all got their pensions. Most of them got raises and promotions. And the department's got a higher budget the following year. They got rewarded for doing the shittiest job you could possibly imagine. If you went to your job and took a dump on your boss's desk, you're not going to get a raise, man. You're going to get fired. These people lied to the American public. It's maybe I should have used that scenario. It's just how they can look in the camera and lie and then get raises and promotions. It's the ultimate slap in the face for those that lost their lives. And I'm never going to stop talking about it until a change is made in this country and it's acknowledged what the hell these people did.
You're a very brave man, and I'm glad that being able to speak about it on air and write books is a form of therapy for yourself, and it brings closure. You know, that's very comforting to know, you know, what was taking place there. One of the Branch Davidians was trying to get access back in, and then he was shot and left dead on the fence, wasn't he, for days on end. The amount of cold-bloodedness surrounding this whole event, they just had no compassion towards anyone, did they?
No, that was Michael Shorter you're talking about. He found out about the firefight early on in the morning, and he tried to get back to the property. I mean, his wife was there, his stepkids were there, his son Brian was there. And as he was trying to sneak back on the property, there was well, they say it was a gunfight. We think he was just shot because we know for sure that there was, as the other guy who was with him was captured, was walking away, he could hear 2 more gunshots. And there was a bullet wound very close to the back of Mike's head. So he was executed by these ATF guys. And, they're sitting out there. They're mad. 4 of their agents have died. 16 agents have been wounded. And they're mad. They want revenge. And Mike Schroeder was that excuse for them to have that revenge.
Tragic, wasn't it? Retaliation.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean,
Well, they're supposed to be professionals.
It's very frightening. And you even had a wedding out there, didn't you?
That was something that they put into the series. There wasn't actually a wedding. It was just kind of like, you're married to Michelle now. And I'm like, okay, fine. We were very close, though. I mean, Michelle was a great girl. I loved her. I really loved, I was really close to Serenity. We spent a lot of time together. Her little girl. And she didn't even say much to me. Just the way she'd look at me, she had these big eyes. She called me Thibodeau. Hello, Thibodeau. And she's just cute. She's really cute. She's a great kid. And, I try not to think about that too much, because then I have to realize what she had to go through for the course of the 51 days. And then at the end, being gassed to death. They literally gassed the kids to death. They took a tank. They drove it through the house to the concrete structure, the only safe place they had to go, especially when you consider people are being shot trying to exit the back of the building. And they gassed that structure to the point where they were choked to death. They choked to death. No one died of burns in that building. They died of asphyxiation. Some of them died of cyanide poisoning. And the reason they died of cyanide poisoning is so much CS gas was put in the structure. And what happens is, as the fire got hot, the CS gas, when it burns off, it turns into cyanide. So, this is the gas that they said was safe for the children to use. It's a gas that burns off into cyanide, and many of them died with cyanide poisoning.
It was an absolute massacre, wasn't it?
Crazy, yeah. Yeah, it was murder.
And they allowed David to do a broadcast. He was going to express his message and try and get some information out, but they cut that short, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Well, what happened was David thought that was going to be played on national television, and it was played on a national Christian radio show. So I don't think that was the reason. I think he was happy that it was played on a Christian radio show. I'm not sure if that's the reason why he ultimately didn't come out. But the agreement was they played the tape and he would come out. We all kind of wish that he would have, to be honest with you, but he didn't. He said the voice said to wait. He believed that he has heard a voice his whole life that has directed him, that has directed his steps and directed his ways, and it's normally led him in righteously. So he just said, we're not leaving. I just want to say this. Everyone was allowed to leave. If you wanted to leave, you could leave. Nobody wanted to leave the group. This was your group. This group was important for several reasons. I don't really talk about it too much. But this group considered themselves to be the wave sheath. Not in an arrogant way. Now, there's a lot of religious people I run into, and they think they're a member of the 144,000. That makes them very special. And then they tend to be a little arrogant about that. David's group was very humble. We didn't think we're anything special at all. But according to the scripture, if this was the group that was learning the 7 seals first, members of the wave sheath, then this is a group that is going to be fought against. David taught this for years, that the authorities were going to come in and fight against his message that he was revealing. And what blows my mind, Jeff, about all this is the FBI could have taken advantage of that if they really wanted everyone to come out. And they could have realized what David was trying to say, or at least listened to him. And then said, hey, you know what? We're making his prophecy come to pass. Gary Nesner even tried to tell him that. If you guys would back away and not put pressure on, then as followers, you'll be proving it's not true. But with every aggressive step you take, you're making his vision, you're making his prophecy, you're making what he's been saying for years. You're solidifying it in the minds of these people. They're not going to leave that building. Nobody wanted to leave that place. Everyone wanted to stay together. Everyone.
Very important point you raised, and a great description of what played out. See, everybody was there on their own free will. They were studying the scripture. It was a peace-loving community. Everybody was happy before the attack, and everyone was living in harmony. It sounds like a very nice community, and we need more of them. More people showing respect towards one another and the learning that was involved, you know, and for the attack to happen like that, it was wrong on so many different levels. And the message that was being portrayed there is a very good one, an end times prophecy. There is merit to it. We're seeing it right now. Mark of the beast. We're seeing the whole takeover. People are saying this is the Bible scripture and it's all coming into fruition now. So it was words of wisdom, and it seems like he was very much ahead of his time. Very valuable information that was being conveyed down there for the Davidians.
Thanks, sir.
Yes. So what plans have you got for the future, and what have you got in store? You must be very happy with the Netflix special, Rory Culkin. You spent some time with him. That would have been special.
Yeah, it was interesting. He's a good kid. He's quiet. It was hard to get. At first, it was kind of hard to get stuff out of him, you know, to really to make a connection. But we went out to dinner once, and we just hung out and talked. I told him about a bunch of the things that happened to me in my life, and he had some experiences that were similar. And once we were able to breach that, and, you know, I'm pretty good at that. I'm a pretty gregarious kind of person. You know, that he was great. He was great. I gave him some drum lessons.
Yes.
He never driven a car before. And one of my favorite things is to get in a car and drive in the streets at night and just take off. And I gave him his first driving lesson. He, being from New York, had never driven a car. And it turns out the very day that I gave him his first driving lesson, he had to drive a car for the scene, the last scene where he comes down to where that burned out structure is. And he was really glad that we had that driving lesson. He didn't think he could have done it without it. So, yeah, it was interesting. He was a very deep kid. He's really in touch with his emotions, and he worked very well with the character that played Serenity on the set. They had a great relationship with her, and it was just a pleasure to watch, really. Taylor Kitsch, of course, did a great job playing David. We've had some fun conversations about that. Everyone on the set was really in tune to what they were doing and why they were there. And, you know, they defended, like I would bring up something negative and they would defend, you know, I'm the one that was there. And they were reminding me of events that took place. I was impressed with how much time and effort people put in to really understanding the Davidians and what happened there. You know, even the extras, they all wanted to know how to be a Davidian. I planned playing Catherine Madison. What was she like? A woman came up to me, I'm playing Sheila Martin. What was Sheila like? And I sat there and I would go through it. I would explain their characters to them, and I would even act it out. You know, I'd be like, "Oh, hi, I'm Sheila. Oh, it's very good to see you. God bless you, brother." Yeah. You know, I would play the different people for them so they could get an understanding of the characters they were dealing with. It was fun. You know, it was a highlight of one of the highlights of my life is being on the movie set. I really enjoyed it. And it humanized the people. That was more important. The community finally got humanized. That had needed to happen 20 years ago. You know?
That's right. And you bring a lot of integrity and credibility to this whole event. We need people, you know, to listen to yourself. You're one of the sole survivors of this whole situation. So that information there is important. Is there anything that you'd like to clear up for the government, some of the disinformation that they've peddled? Is there anything that you'd like to set straight for some of the viewers that they might have been led down the wrong path with all of this information?
Sure.
Platforms?
Yeah, there's three big things for me. The who fired first, I think that's pretty much known that it was the ATF. The helicopters fired on the first day. A lot of people don't realize that. There are still people that do YouTube channels who are claiming that the ATF never fired for the helicopters. Excuse me, guys. I don't know where that came from. Sorry. It's not that late here. So some of them said, you know, that the helicopters never fired. The helicopters fired in the building. The helicopters came in. Kevin Whitecliffe saw them. shoot at Peter Gent. They killed Peter Gent on a water tower. They killed Winston Blake, who was in his room at the back of the building. There was a water tank in front of him. They put holes in the water tank. I actually saw the trajectory of the hole in the water tank, the two holes, right where the water tank curves like this. There's a bullet hole coming from the outside through the curve inside. I got down on my knees after they cleared Winston Blake's body out of the room, and I looked at the trajectory, fired from the air between the two. There were two towers. The one tower that was where David Koresh's room was, and then the other tower that Peter Gent was working on. It's fired from the air. I talked to Dick DeGuerin, who was one of the attorneys for David, who told me that he saw the sheetrock hanging from the ceiling from the bullets coming from the outside in. So there's no doubt about it. There's enough eyewitness testimony. The helicopter's absent. They can deny it all they want. They're fucking lying to you. Excuse my French. I'm sorry. I get really passionate. I'll try to. I'm sorry about swearing, guys.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
But they're just lying to you. They're just lying. And every time they open their mouth, it just makes me crazy. So that's major. I think that the other major thing is the shooting at the back of the building. If it's proven, the infrared video is enough for me. Then you look at the autopsy reports. 10 or so autopsy reports show people with bullet wounds in the center of their head, the center of their chest. That's not an accident. You don't kill yourself. Nobody shoots himself like this. Nobody. That's even the coroner's office said that we felt this was a mass homicide, not a mass suicide. So when Bill Clinton raised his finger and said, if a bunch of religious fanatics want to kill themselves, what can the federal government do about it? That was the final word on WACO as far as the American press is concerned. That's all they needed to hear. Well, that's a lie, Bill. If it's a homicide and not a suicide, then your whole statement and premise is wrong, which basically means that historically it's wrong. You killed people. It should open the entire thing up again.
Yes.
It is not a suicide. It was a homicide. Even if you shot one or two people just trying to escape, even if everyone else shot themselves because they were in fear of dying from the fire, if you just shot a couple of people, makes a murder, man. You said for 51 days you just want everyone to come out. They come out, you shoot them?
It certainly does. It's mass murder on one of the worst scales ever recorded in human history. And I think we're going to see more unfortunate scenarios like this play out. The more the government increases these tyrannical measures, people will start searching for locations off grid. They'll start trying to become self-sufficient, just like the Davidians. So I'm hoping that we don't see more chaos, more pandemonium, and more attacks perpetrated by the government. We're heading into very dangerous times of uncertainty, and the future is looking very grim. Now, you've got some literature that you've put out, some books. If people wanted to get more research in depth on this subject matter, how would they go about purchasing those books?
Well, I started a website, wacosurvivors.com. www, obviously, WACO Survivors, plural with an S.com. And I wanted to make it an information site, which I have. You can see we're in the process of getting all of the FBI negotiation tapes up there. We have all the manuscripts, the manuscripts from the actual phone conversations. There's Livingston Fagan, one of the survivors. We have some of his writings up there. We have some sermons from David Koresh himself back in the 80s that he gave. A lot of great audio stuff. There's also a shop. Anyone, if you purchase, well, I can't ship to Australia. If it's in the United States or they pay extra for Canada, I can ship. I do signed copies of my book. The book's $25 and I'll sign it for you and personalize it. I just can't handle the shipping internationally right now. But there's also, I created a shirt. It's the Mount Carmel Survivors official Mount Carmel memorial shirt. It's got a dove on it. Remember Mount Carmel on the back. It's got a listing of all the names of all the people who had died. We also have those on a few different items, the hats, and also the documentaries, the rules of engagement that I mentioned. I have those for sale. And all that helps, it helps me and it helps move the message. It allows me to be able to do this and speak to people. But we also have one more thing. We have a donation place where you can donate to the Mount Carmel Historical and Preservation Fund. And here's what's happening. The building that you're seeing behind me is a picture of what Mount Carmel looks like today. That church that you're looking at was built by people who came forward. Alex Jones actually had a good hand in getting a lot of people to donate materials and time. They built that for the survivors. Now, there was one guy that the survivors allowed to live on the property. His name was Charlie Pace. And Charlie studied under Lois Road. He did not like David. He left before David took over. And after everyone died, he came and just started to squat on the property and live there with his family. We allowed him to. Then he got to the point where he was just very belligerent to a lot of the survivors. He was trying to do things like take the trees down that were planted on behalf of the people. And he got very hard to deal with. And so people started leaving. No one could deal with it. He was just, it's like that gnat that you just can't kill. It just keeps coming back and bugging you. Clive basically left the property, didn't want to deal with Charlie anymore. He ended up kicking Ophelia, one of the older survivors, off the property. I was living in Maine at the time. So he's basically taken over, and I was allowed on the property for a while. That he asked me to leave. He asked me not to talk to people coming there to see me because of the series. And so the last straw for me is when he put these 3 banners up in the chapel, that building that you're looking at. One of the banners basically had Heather Jones. Heather Jones is 9 years old when she came out of the building. She's one of the fire survivors. I'm sorry. She came out during the siege. She's one of the children survivors. And Charlie put a picture of her family. David Jones, the mailman, was her dad. All of David Koresh's kids were her cousins. She lost 13 family members in the fire. And he put her family on this banner that basically said, if you follow David Koresh, you're rotting in hell right now. And so every time she would refuse to go into the chapel ever again. So I told Charlie he needs to take these banners down. He wouldn't do it. He's just a mean old person. He's a mean person. He wouldn't listen to reason. We all left. So I can't let it go. I can't let someone treat Heather like that. So I've got the court papers from the past. I've got an attorney, a real estate attorney, and we're going to try to challenge Charlie in court and basically go back to living on the property without him being able to say anything about it. That's going to cost money. So I want to preserve the place. I want to make it a museum, and I want to make it a historical site that nobody can mess with in the future. Charlie will never have the authority to sell that land as long as I'm alive. And so that's what this fund is, the Mount Carmel Historical and Preservation Fund. And anybody who donate to that goes to that cause.
Yeah, very good cause too. Everybody should support. It's a shame that it came down to that conflict, but hopefully you get the best possible outcome. You're a very brave man, and I'm very pleased and very happy that you're having success with the Netflix special. And most importantly, I'm very glad that you lived to tell the story. Thank you very much for coming on the program. All the relevant links and information will be in the description. Best of success in the future, and keep in touch.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Jeff.
Well, that does it for today's show. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content. And I'll catch you on the next episode where we expose corruption one show at a time.